impact investing. So there's that. Someone who's an innovator and is driving significant change, or is trying to drive significant change in social investment. Stephanie Gripne is the founder and CEO of the Impact Finance Center. Her goal, the organization's goal, is to move $1 trillion of investment capital into social ventures. The idea is to try to help organizations who are trying to do good in the world do well. She is a leader in Colorado, is now recognized as a leader in investment capital. And the theory here, the basic message that she's going to get to is how innovations in capital investment are going to change the business ecosystem. Stephanie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. How is everybody doing? Welcome to Colorado. Can you all hear me in the back of the room? Are we good? Well, thank you so much for having me speak here today. I am going to start with a confession. I am an academic entrepreneur. Anyone ever heard of an academic entrepreneur? One clap in the back. That's fantastic. What does that mean? I love transactions, like doing transactions for good. I've done probably close to 200 transactions since 2000. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But if I'm only doing transactions, I miss the academic part. What she just said, Lynn just said, we've actually published this paper in the Foundation Review, and it's a blueprint on how to catalyze $1 trillion into good things. So I like geeky professor, let's create a crazy framework and fix the capital markets and move $1 trillion. And I also like behavioral economics. Like, how do we get the C-suite of a Fortune 100 company to make a change? And then if I'm only doing research, I miss teaching and then career coaching. Those are my favorite parts of my job. So if I'm only doing teaching and research, I miss the transactions. So if I'm only doing transactions, I miss the teaching and the research. What kind of transactions? I started off in 2000 developing my own private portfolio in affordable housing, supporting families going through medical bankruptcy. So my family was living in Lander, Wyoming. I was a PhD student. And my dad came to live back with me in his encore part of his life. And I said, Dad, you got to get a job or volunteer. And he got a mortgage license and a real estate license. And next thing you know, we were cobbling together as grad students $5,000, and we were buying a house in Lander, Wyoming. And my dad said, you know what? There's all these people that had good credit. They just didn't have the right medical insurance. And they went through this thing called a medical bankruptcy. So they were good credit risks. And so what did we do? We would buy a house for $120,000. My dad would get the mortgage fee and the real estate fee, and then we would lease it to them for, say, 3 years, the last 3 remaining years of their medical bankruptcy. And we would essentially say, you know what? Come lease the house for the last 3 years of your medical bankruptcy. And if you choose to buy the home from us, we'll give you 10% of your rent every month as partial equity. And if the house appreciates more than 10% after fees, we'll give you that upside too. The houses appreciated 15 to 25%. And we had about 9 houses. We did 2 or 3 this way. So the bottom line of the story is we had the joy of philanthropy, a job for my dad, a 10% return, an amazing tenant. These families got to move into their home 3 to 5 years early, get dignity, partial equity, and upside. And we were low middle income graduate students at the time doing this work. And so that was the start of the journey, and that was about 200 transactions ago. So I've done my own individual transactions. I've been in private equity funds. I've worked for university foundations, trustees on many donor-advised funds, and I love doing transactions. So that's what we mean. In my private equity fund, we were working on palm oil supply chain projects in Borneo. So I've done everything from real estate to startups to small businesses. So that's who I am. In 2012, I left University of Colorado, where I was a business school professor at the Lead School of Business. I might add, my PhD is in forest economics. I've never actually had a business class. So the good news for anybody in the room, everything I'm about to teach you, if I can learn it, you can learn it. So I'm a professor in sustainable real estate and finance in the finance department up at University of Colorado in the Real Estate Foundation. doing transactions and teaching and doing research on this. And I left in 2012 to start my own center, a nonprofit academic center. Why would I do such a thing? One, there are 600 entrepreneurship centers in North America serving students. Does anyone have any guesses how many innovation impact investing centers there are? Any guesses? Maybe 15? Every single entrepreneurship center needs an innovative finance center to actually grow the capital, whether it's for a Fortune 100 company, 500 company, startup, small business startup, or nonprofit social enterprise or project. And guess what? I don't know if you've seen the prediction, but Clay Christensen at Harvard has predicted that 50% of higher education is going to go bankrupt by 2030. So we actually need the financial innovation centers, not just for the entrepreneurship centers, but for actually the work out of the universities. So I thought to myself, well, with university budgets declining, they're not going to start more centers. How do we create a nonprofit multi-university academic center that can license curriculum, serve students in multiple universities? So that's what the Impact Finance Center is. Practically, we teach investor education. Does everyone here know what you had your lunch speaker was Techstars today. Does everyone know what an accelerator is? Everyone clear with that? Who provides non-conflicted education, investor education for individuals and organizations with more than $10 million? Can anyone name an organization that would do that? Non-conflicted investor education for individuals and organizations with more than $10 million. Where do you go to get that? I don't know either. That's what the Impact Finance Center does. We are intentionally designed as a nonprofit because we're not looking to get assets under management. So how does that story work? This is a true story of a billion-dollar foundation. They come to our nonprofit academic center because we're not looking to manage their money or have them invest in a fund or do anything like that. And they say, Stephanie, can you teach us about full spectrum capital and impact investing? And I say, absolutely. Tell me about it, just before we go into it. We have about 50 tools across your $1 billion. Are you talking about the 25 tools we have in your endowment? Because just governance and investment beliefs and decision-based attribution evaluation, we just identified a $100 million foundation in the Pacific Northwest was paying an extra $1 million in fees with their investment advisor to lose $5 million over 5 years. Locally in Colorado, we just evaluated the AJL Charitable Foundation, a $16 million foundation, determined they were paying an extra $400,000 in investment fees over 10 years to lose 1.5% interest. And that was without regard to impact. So those are two examples of the 50 tools. Those are in the endowment. Then I said, or we have another 10 to 15 over in the philanthropy, or we also help support you with direct investing. There's about 10 tools there. And they said, Stephanie, we just want to make our first loan to a nonprofit. And I said, oh, absolutely, we can help you out. Now, from a strategy, I'm a recovering economist perspective, and from a strategy perspective, here's what I've learned. I can never predict what first 50 tool of the 50 tools somebody's going to want to do. I'll be like, I know Dan. He's going to want to do a direct investment. And he'll say, no, I want to do governance. I want to start with evaluating my investment advisor. And so what we've learned is, there's stated preferences and revealed preferences, and you have to give people the buffet and let them choose. Because what we do know is if they do one of the 50 tools, they'll do many more. We've done an applied academic research project looking at foundation investments, and it's a R-square 0.73, regardless of asset size, and the outcome of that first investment. So if they do one, they'll do two. So it's important to give people a good first experience, a low-cost learning by doing first experience. And so we come to this foundation, this billion-dollar foundation, and I said, we can absolutely help you with this. I said, what's your financial return on the endowment? And they said, about 5%. This was about 6 years ago. So picture wherever geography you live in. They're taking $1 billion of money from that geography, paying 0.5% in investment fees to send that money outside of that geography of tax-exempt money that has already been set aside to do good things, to invest in companies, fixed incomes, bonds, in order to come back to that geography. And I said, okay. I said, how much money did you give away in grants last year? And you may or may not know this, but private foundations since 1969 have to give away 5% of their endowment in the form of grants, program-related investments, and operating costs. And I said, and they said, 0. And now I'm going to ask you all to pull out your pen and paper right now to see if you're paying attention. I said, hey, private foundation, what's your financial return of a grant when you give the money away? So last year, the Zoma Foundation gave my nonprofit, and the Zoma Foundation is a nonprofit, they gave my nonprofit $100,000. What would the financial return to the Zoma Foundation be on that grant? And I want you to take a second and just write down the answer. The financial return on a grant. And here's another hint. I just realized this week as I was preparing for the talk. It's the same financial return of a marketing dollar, a CSR dollar, an R&D dollar. So what's the financial return of a grant? Now I want you to talk with your neighbor just for a second. Spend 1 minute. You talk with your neighbor. If you can hear me, raise your hand and stop talking. Do we have any brave souls in the room who are willing to yell out an answer? Intangible. We have one intangible. We have one over here that was? 0. Any other answers? Reputation. I'm looking for a financial return. We gave the $1 billion, we invested with the investment advisor, sent it away, got a 5%. I'm looking for a percent. So, oh, getting closer, warmer. So here's what I say. So I said, number 1, you're getting a 5% return on $1 billion, right? So you basically, well, let's simplify it, $100. You get a 5% return on $100. You invest $100 with your investment advisor. A year later, they give you back $100 plus what? $5. All good with that? Now I'm going to give you scenario number 3. 0% loan. I loan Dan $100, and a year later he gives me back that $100. Or he gives me a 0% loan. I gave you the answer. 0% loan. I give Dan $100. A year later he gives me back what? $100. Yeah, and we're not going tax complicated inflation on this one. Thanks, we're not playing on that. So now, what's the financial return if I give Dan $100 and I don't get it back? It's not 0. It's negative 100% financial return. Is everyone tracking that? Negative 100% financial return. And it now doesn't matter if you're high income, middle income, or low income. We've all bifurcated our money, and kudos to the brilliant marketing people that had us forget that our philanthropy is an investment attempting positive impact with a negative 100% financial return, and that all of our investments have impact. Our philanthropy is an investment, and all of our investments have impact. I'm going to walk through and talk about connected innovation in a second. So of course, and they're like, okay, I get that. How do we do this? So tool number 4, when you're teaching somebody that works with negative 100% money about this financial innovation, you start with what they give to, what they're already doing, and you do a sources and uses analysis. And you say, what are you giving to? And they say partial scholarship, school facilities, economic development, and hospices. And I say, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're giving a student an $8,000 student loan, partial scholarship. You're giving a student an $8,000 partial scholarship out of your grant dollars, your negative 100% investment dollars, when that student has a student loan at $70,000 at 10% interest. Did you know you've had a tax incentive since 1969 to give that student a $78,000 student loan out of your negative 100% money at 1% interest? Can anyone help me in the room? What's the financial return from negative 100 to 1? It's 101% financial return on fixed income plus a tax deduction. You'll save that student more than the $8,000 you're giving them. You will that 1% profit, you'll actually grow your endowment and you'll recycle your principal for another student. And then they say school facilities. And I said, I did some phone calls. A typical state has $16 billion of school facilities. That's great. You're giving a $1 million grant to them. Do you know what happens when you take a $5 million mortgage at 6 to 12% interest and you refinance it at 2% interest? You save that school millions of dollars while you're getting 102% return on fixed income, a 10x return on fixed income. And then they say economic development. And I said, did you know since 1969, private foundations, corporate foundations have had a tax incentive to give a grant, a loan, or an equity investment to a for-profit, startup, small business, co-op fund that's furthering the charitable purpose of the mission of the foundation? And in the last administration, there were 2 IRS revenue rulings to encourage this behavior. And it makes perfect sense. You take the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they want to eradicate polio. So they're taking grant dollars, negative 100% money, and investing in for-profit polio vaccine companies, because if those scale the market and eradicate polio, then they've achieved the mission of their foundation. And this is my favorite one, which is now a real-life case, is when's the last time somebody said, I have the coolest negative 50% return investment opportunity for you? About 6 months ago, Teresa Ish of the Walton Family Foundation, she's one of the largest funders in oceans and global sustainable fisheries, came to me and said, I have $2,500 of professional development money, and I need you to teach me this impact investing thing. I said, great, how about 10 sessions? And she says, super. And on her 5th session, she got approved a negative 50% return investment into a for-profit sustainable seafood company. And if you ask Teresa, is that market rate, below market rate, concessionary? It's technically above market rate because she's been giving all of her money away at negative 100% financial return. And now she's helping out a company that wants to do good by going in emerging markets and helping save fisheries, but they don't want to take on all the risk. And so you can go, this will be on a podcast coming up within the next month or two with SOCAP, as we're sharing the story of a negative 50% return investment into a for-profit sustainable seafood company, which, by the way, is a 50% increase for her giving her money away. So is everyone tracking this full spectrum capital? Like, that we have artificially bifurcated our money. And now we're going to talk about 3 little case studies. A corporate Fortune 100 company, a startup, a nonprofit social enterprise, just so you can see how this kind of comes to be. And then I'm actually going to open it up to you for the last parts of the keynote and talk about, like, how do we deal with, how do we get this concept of full spectrum aligned capital out there in the community from an awareness perspective? What's the strategy to do that? How do we get people educated once they're aware? And then how do we actually help them think about how to strategically integrate this in any of the work that they're doing? And we're rolling out a corporate exec ed class for corporate innovation impact investing this year, and with the concept of how do we actually teach people how to do that. So the Impact Finance Center, just to regroup, is a non-conflicted nonprofit. We are tech stars for the money. We identify, educate, and activate individuals and organizations with more than $10 million on how to invest in good things. We are primarily focused on individuals, private foundations, community foundations, and now we're going into the corporate sector. Then we'll go into the family office sector. We have a couple social enterprises. We started Impact Days this year. You can think of that as Match.com for social ventures and the money. So over the last 3 years, we piloted a concept that we plan to expand throughout the world, and you can think of it as Startup Week meets Gives Day. So if you think of Startup Week for good, companies doing good stuff, and nonprofit, they come together for Impact Days. So we had a 3-year goal to catalyze $100 million of investment in one state. We identified 600 investment opportunities. We identified, educated, and activated about 50 new impact investors, added them to the 200, and then we would bring everybody to a farmer's market every 18 months. And we've already catalyzed $260 million of investment for 200 investments in the first 3-year pilot. And we know we can expand this throughout the world. And so this week I got calls from Brazil, Serbia, Johannesburg, Vancouver, Boise, Idaho. They're all saying, can we do Impact Days? And we're like, absolutely. Here's a starter kit. You can start with an impact investing giving circle. And 3 years from now, we've done 200 classes in Colorado, and we're putting them all online, in-person live streaming, and we're creating a sliding scale social justice institute. So our hope is within 3 years, you'll be able to come to us and we'll say, just like Startup Week or Gives Day, here's your manual on how to do your impact days in your geography. Here's a sliding scale subscription to an institute with all the curriculum you need, and you can put your content on it too. And here's some seed grant funding to get going. And if we do that organically, in different cities, states, regions, we can scale this up and create the national impact investing marketplace and move $1 trillion. So let's talk about the case studies. We this year have decided to go into corporate America and take this full spectrum capital and innovation, and I just met with the head of innovation and technology for a Fortune 100 company. And they're a utility company. And so this is their problem. Like if you talk to the government affairs person, they're out there talking to small town America with the city and county government, getting franchise agreements for the utility. And if you talk to him, he'd be like, Andy's like, hey, I want to be seen as an economic development partner. I just don't want to be seen as a franchisee. This particular corporate foundation expanded their corporate foundation to include entrepreneurship, and they did their first grant to fund a public entrepreneurship center. And it's worked so well, the person who did that has been promoted to head of technology and innovation, and now they've taken that public entrepreneurship center and moved it into 13 territories. So now they're putting in the broadband, they're bringing in the support services for the entrepreneurs. But if you bring in support services with the entrepreneurs without identifying and educating and activating the capital to invest in the entrepreneurs, you create a field of dreams effect. If you build it, will it come? The answer is no, it won't. So our pitch to them is, let's create your company's impact investing giving circles externally to actually identify, educate, and activate the capital where you're doing your public entrepreneurship programs, where you're actually doing your utility. Oh, and by the way, we can do an internal company impact investing giving circle where your employees can do volunteer engagement and learn by doing. They can learn about this full spectrum capital, aligned capital, and how it affects the rest of the company. And the woman who leads technology and innovation for this Fortune 100 company looked at me and said, Stephanie, this isn't a corporate foundation play. This is a supply chain play, and an enterprise play, and a venture play. And I said, I know. Think about it. Philanthropy isn't the only dollar out there that's getting a negative 100% financial return. So is our marketing dollars. So is our corporate social responsibility dollars. So is our supply chain dollars. Anytime we're investing in something that is going to create a good or service in the future to generate something is technically the same as philanthropy from that perspective. And so if you learn this full spectrum capital, it doesn't matter what sector you're in, you can actually bring it back and work in any of your companies, whether you're in the for-profit, public sector, nonprofit sector, projects, consultants. So that was the Fortune 100 case. And what we're doing with that is 4 years ago, the Impact Finance Center sponsored the International Net Impact Case Competition because I was calling all these companies and saying, will you sponsor my Impact Investing Conference, Colorado Impact Days? And they said, what's impact investing? And so I had to explain it's full spectrum capital that's aligned with doing good for the world, and that took the first half an hour of the conversation. And because I've been a professor, I'm really keen on using business case competitions to kind of use it as a way to innovate and get ideas out there in the world. So we sponsored the International Net Impact Case Competition. We had 200 MBA students from the world compete on this topic, corporate financial innovation and impact investing. So Claire is in a Fortune 100 company, and she's been in CSR, marketing, venture, and now she's in the corporate foundation. And the first day of the case of this class is the CEO said, Claire, we've never had a strategy around our foundation. It's been tit for tat philanthropy. If you can design a strategy, and I want you to use this thing called impact investing, full spectrum capital, I'll hire you. And so the first day of the course is people like you sitting in a class where you have to learn about full spectrum capital, impact investing, and you have to design a foundation within constraints, and you do a slide deck by the end of the day. And so you get hired, and the next day of the class is Claire says, the CEO says, Claire, you're hired. But now Claire, if you think about it, if you're Cliff Bar, you actually have Cliff Bar Foundation, you might have the venture arm, which is White Road Investments, you have the CSR arm, you have the marketing arm. When opportunities come up for a Fortune 100 company, how are we deciding which of the entities is going to be the investor? So the second day of the case competition is actually, or in the executive ed course, is actually designing a strategy for interorganizational functioning across the silos of the organization. And we're actually working with Autodesk right now, and the corporate foundation is working with the CEO's office and the enterprise office to achieve this work. And so it's a really fun 2-day class. And what's super exciting is full spectrum capital works for your entity regardless if you're doing good things or not good things. If you are doing good things, we're especially interested in you. And so what do I mean by that? Patagonia has an internal impact investing fund. Cliff Bar, the owners sold part of the company to the employees. They exited. They created an external impact investing fund. Some employees at Walmart left Walmart and created the Closed Loop Partners, Closed Loop Fund and Closed Loop Venture Fund. They started looking into waste streams. Waste is a big problem for Fortune 100 companies. It's bad PR, harm for the environment, costs them a lot of money. And they started looking at how would they actually fix this problem? And it turns out cities don't have the same size of recycling containers and trash containers. And so what they did is created the first $100 million multiple limited partner debt fund for corporations to either take money out of their treasury or their corporate foundation. 1% return would be 101% return plus a tax deduction. For cities to borrow at low cost debt to redo their recycling infrastructure. We call this a trash to cash, to save the fishies play. They also created a venture arm, Closed Loop Ventures, which is investing in venture type technologies like Rebound Technology, a company based in Colorado that has the ability to cool food faster for less energy. And they care about that because if they get that to go to if they get that technology to work, they can inject it back in all those Fortune 100 supply chain companies. Many companies have started innovating around accelerators. Wells Fargo has an accelerator, Nike Foundation has an accelerator, Chipotle has an accelerator. And so you're seeing companies, whether they want to partner with an organization like Techstars or to do it externally or do it internally. There's private label partnering with Uncharted, and some companies, Morgan Stanley has a new accelerator. You're seeing companies actually do accelerations. You're seeing companies like Autodesk, Twilio actually having direct investing programs and funds where they're actually investing in entities around that actually further their mission. And this is a super fun one. Starbucks upgraded their supply chain. And what happens when a big company upgrades their supply chain is there's generally increased costs to the suppliers. So instead of actually pushing those costs onto the suppliers, they issued a bond off of their balance sheet and became the first sustainability supply chain bond. And so they're saying, yes, suppliers, we are going to ask you to do more, but here's access to 2.5% money that you couldn't get access to off of our balance sheet to do that. So that's the fun part about the corporate financial innovation and impact investing. Now I'll talk to you about specifically a startup, Silvernest. Has anyone ever heard of Silvernest in the room? Colorado is the third fastest growing aging population in the United States. And everybody knows if you've cared for your parent, I've lost both of mine, cared for them in their home, they're happier, they're healthier, and they save the taxpayers money. 40% of the aging population has only saved $50,000 for retirement. And half of them own their home. This is a problem. That's why they call it the silver tsunami. It's a problem that's going to affect every one of us in this room. Silvernest is an online technology platform to connect the aging population to housemates for additional income, companionship, and help around the house. It's a SaaS play, meets AARP, Match.com, from that perspective. So when I met Wendy about 4 years ago, it was her third technology company. She's a women-led founder. And I said, you're an impact investing startup. You're women-led, you're aging, you're intergenerational connectivity, affordable housing, economic development, climate, health. You got 7 impact areas. And I said, I'm now working with individuals, community foundations, private foundations, corporate foundations, that would actually take grant dollars and invest in your for-profit technology company. I said, would you go on that journey with me? I can't make any promises. Don't not raise money from the conventional startup money. Turns out 1/3 of her $1.3 million, Impact Finance Center, came from new money that we identified, educated, and activated, and her $3 million A round, the introduction came from one of us. So we actually identified, educated, and activated new money to invest in that startup. I was brought in to talk to a group of about 44 donors about 3 years ago, and they said, Stephanie, can you teach us impact investing? And I said, your philanthropy is investment, negative 100%. All your investments have impact. And one brave donor in the back of the room, I hope somebody in this doesn't understand this, they said, can you explain this without math? I said, give me a second. And I said, do you all know Wendy Silvernest? A couple of them did. I explained Wendy with Silvernest. And so these are donors. And this is important about your identity, how you show up in the world. It doesn't matter if you're an investor or a donor or whatever you are. And I said, she's raising $1.3 million in a seed round. How many of you would invest in Silvernest at $25,000? And these are sophisticated, smart people in this room. Some of them have assets of $10 to $50 million. And I'll never forget, I had this feeling they pushed back at me. They're like, Stephanie, we're donors. We're not investors. And I said, well, let's unpack that for a minute. Could we pretend Silvernest is a nonprofit? After all, it's women-led, it's aging, Airbnb meets Match.com ARP, it's helping the aging population, it's got all these impact areas. Could we pretend it's a nonprofit? And they said, totally. I said, if it were a nonprofit, how many of you would donate $25,000 to it? And 1/3 of them raised their hands. And I said, let's unpack this. You're not going to get your money back, which we call negative 100% financial return. And for some reason, we give nonprofits our high risk capital. And then we handcuff them. We say, you can't take risk, you can't fail, you have to be cash on cash, and you can't leverage unless you're some complex tandem hybrid structure. So go save the world, but we're going to handcuff you after we give you your highest risk capital. And then I said, let's talk about those smarty pants entrepreneurs, those startup people. They don't even have to make the world a better place, and they fail 75 to 85% of the time, giving you a negative 100% financial return by grant or nonprofit. But you do have a 10 to 15% chance of getting your money back. They're allowed to risk, they're allowed to fail, they're allowed to leverage. And I said, there must be a third way. What if we take the best of the nonprofit world and the best of the for-profit world? And what if all of us in this room activate all of our money for full spectrum capital so we can actually invest in that new way? So that was the birthplace of an impact investing giving circle. You take individuals, foundations, most of them are major league. I'll use a baseball analogy. Most of them are major league when it comes to intelligence, major league when it comes to access to resources, major league when it comes to their mission and values, even major league entrepreneurial, some of the smartest people I know. But you ask how many of them have invested in a Silvernest or a nonprofit mortgage? They're not major league there. They're not even AAA or AA or single A, they're not even Babe Ruth or Little League. They're a T-ball. We keep pitching these asset owners, these individuals and organizations, opportunities at a major league opportunity without realizing their experience level is T-ball. How do you expect them to hit an 85-mile-an-hour fast pitch if they never hit something off the tee? And so that was the creation of an impact investing giving circle. And I said, donors, you all tell me, you care about women. Let's talk about women in your geography. We'll pick Colorado for this perspective. I said, how many individuals and organizations care about social ventures? When I say social ventures, I mean projects, nonprofits, startups, small businesses, funds, co-ops, anything you can think of, any stage, any sector, led by and benefiting women in the state of Colorado, where they would donate at least $2,000, the cost of sponsoring a rubber chicken dinner at an event. And they said, 250. And I said, let's go open up another giving circle at the Women's Foundation of Colorado. There's 18 community foundations in Colorado. Most states have 5 to 30 community foundations. So it's a charitable vehicle. We'll go get those 40, 50 out of the 250 will donate in. You get a tax deduction. It's social. You get to be with others that care about your topic area, your community of interest, place, or identity. You'll learn 50 ways to activate your portfolio for, in this case, women. You'll bring your pet projects to the table. We'll do a couple classes out in the community, the nonprofit women's class and the small business women's class and startups women's class. And crazy thing, we'll do a call for social ventures. We've done this 5 times in Colorado. Does anyone have any sense of how many investments, when you say who needs money, how much you get? How many people need money? 100 to 300 applications for 100 to 500 million. And so those people will panic a little bit. They're like, we only have $200,000 in our little donor kitty. And it's like, it's okay. This isn't about you solving the problem. It's about you having a T-ball experience, your first safe, low-cost experience. So let's pick a big one. Let's pick a small one. Let's pick a high-risk one. Let's pick a low-risk one. Crazy thing, unlike your other giving circles, there's a small chance some of the money will come back to the charitable fund at the community foundation. If it does, we'll recycle it and do it again. And so that was the birthplace of the T-ball investor education tool, which I realized you could use in a community with the community foundation, but you can also use within a Fortune 100 company as volunteer engagement and a way to teach the employees about full spectrum aligned capital, to bring it back into the company and also do outreach into the community. The last one, nonprofit social enterprise. When our nonprofit class, you could actually walk out the door here to the Museum of Contemporary Art. When we say nonprofits and impact investing, they can use it in a lot of ways. I believe there's about $50 billion of nonprofit investments just in a state like Colorado alone. How is that possible? You can refinance existing lines of credit, mortgages, make assets more efficient. You can start social enterprises, and then you can do performance-based contracting, pay-as-you-save, social impact bonds. Let's walk you through a couple of those. If you walk down the street here, Museum of Contemporary Art, they had an adjustable rate mortgage. It was going to expire. We were able to give them the strategy, and their board took it and ran with it. It was a $9.5 million mortgage, pretty high interest rate. They were able to get it down to $5.5 million. They got a local foundation to do their first direct investment for 1% and 2 of the board members. That 1% mortgage saved that museum $550,000 a year. Gave the donors and foundation 101% return plus a tax deduction. You go kitty corner around the corner, you can make assets more efficient. You'll see the Alliance Center. From 2012, I led the historic building renovation there from design and construction. We were short $6 million. So what did we do? We led the building renovation. We had the founding donor willing to write a $6 million check. We had an existing $2.5 million mortgage. What we did, I went to the donor and I said, listen, instead of giving me $6 million, would you give me $9.5 million? It was a $3.5 million mortgage. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, I met with my friend who's a trustee at the local community foundation, and we would like to change 43 things at the local community foundation. And so we made the list. I'm like, let's go meet with the top 5 community foundations and see if they'll change their mind. Strategy. And so we went around to each of them, and we're like, we would like to bring this large donor advised fund here, and we would like you to make 43 changes, including allowing us to make a loan from our donor advised fund to this nonprofit at 1% or 0% interest. And one of the large community foundations agreed to it. So that loan saved the nonprofit $4.5 million. It got us out of our public bond financing, which allowed us to do a historic tax credit to save another $1.5 million. So we saved $6 million. The donor gets 101% return plus a tax deduction, and we use this to launch a community foundation impact investing strategy. Those were the first 2 of our close to 200 transactions we've done in the last 5 years. As you can see, each one of them is net putting in, the museum one, $500,000 unrestricted money annually. That's as if it's an unrestricted grant. $6 million unrestricted money. Then social enterprise. I love this one. The Gathering Place is our only daytime drop-in shelter for women, children, transgender individuals, and you're increasingly seeing nonprofits go to social enterprise to actually build a social enterprise to sell a good or service. And they came up with the idea to create Art Restart. So they invite homeless individuals to make art. Started with cards, and now they're doing scarves and clothing. So you can go online and buy your cards from Art Restart. They make money. The first part of the money goes to the homeless individual. Part of it goes to keep our restart going, and then the other part goes back to the gathering place. So it becomes a social enterprise to actually help that nonprofit grow. And when Teresa, the executive director of Art Restart, got on stage, she said, you would think the fact that you're giving a homeless individual $500 and you're giving them food, shelter, and clothing for that month is what they're most happy about. But they're actually most happy because somebody considers them an artist. It's their dignity and identity. And so I hope you've all been convinced about this, that even if you don't understand this negative full spectrum capital and then the alignment piece, how to align it from mission, there's a way to bring this back to your day job and use it. There really is. And we are a nonprofit academic center, so our mission is to get this stuff out into the world as much as possible. And there is no question to me, it's exciting to be at a strategy conference because there's a saying, what is it, that nobody ever got fired for buying IBM? Or the Keynesian quote that people would rather be wrong in a crowd than right by themselves. There's this tricky piece of when you're bringing some financial new and disruptive innovation in, whether it's a large corporation or into a city or something else like that, how do you actually introduce it in a way from a messenger that people can hear, where they can actually take it in and actually get action, actually turn that into an action. And the one I'm working on right now, so hopefully somebody in this room will actually do this for me instead of me doing this, is this was a local $350 million foundation. And let's say they care about workforce housing. And the CFO comes to me and says, Stephanie, I have to earn 7% on the endowment so that we can give away $30 million. And I said, what if I could give you an 8% return to keep that money in place in Colorado? And I said, what if we take $1 million at an 8% return out of your endowment and add it to $1 million you were going to give away to workforce housing at negative 100%? Now you have $2 million. Is there anybody in the room that remembers their 4th grade math? How you get to the number, we'll do a more simple one. If I said I have $1 million at 4% and $1 million at 2%, and I want to combine them for $2 million, what would be the blended rate of return of that? 3%. We got that? How do we get there? We take 2% plus 4%, we get 6%, we divide by 2. Now I have $1 million at negative 100% and $1 million at 8%. We combine them, we have $2 million at what? You take 100, negative 100% plus 8 is negative 92, divide by 2 is negative 46.5% interest. Does anyone know what the rate of return you need to make workforce housing fly and do all that we need? We have $90 billion of need in a state like Colorado. Like negative 10% money. So that means I can actually say, hey, Ken, give me more money out of your endowment. Give me $10 million. I'll give you an increased financial return of 8%. It will take $10 million out of your endowment, combine it with $1 million out of your grant making, and that blended rate of that return might be closer to negative 10% return. And so the point of it being, we actually have enough money to invest in ourselves if we use this approach for any startup, small business project and fund. So I'm going to open it up for questions, but I'm going to leave you with the last bit of the story. And I think part of the strategy piece is our own limiting beliefs. And as I went through the Impact Days journey, I got really out of shape. And even though I played 3 sports in college, this is a confession, I'm pretty public about it now, I had chickened out of running, I think 3 or 4 running races since 8th grade. I mean, I had this mental block. And so last year, I made a commitment to run my first running race. I should have done the 800 meters in 8th grade. That would have been easier. But I did the half marathon in Duluth, Minnesota. And my college roommates were up in Duluth, Minnesota. And they said, hey, can you talk to our beloved mayor after the half marathon in Duluth, Minnesota? Because he went from being mayor to running a $35 million foundation, the Ordeon Foundation. And I said, sure. So we're sitting in the bar after the half marathon, and he's like, Stephanie, is this how a private foundation works? And he's like, I know how to be mayor. I don't know how to run a foundation. And he's like, we're giving the same 10 grants to the same 10 organizations for the same 10 years. And so I have like 1.3 million. The rest of it's invested with a big bank. They're sending it outside of Duluth. Is this how this works? And I said, you're doing it exactly perfectly. And I said, but you know what, Don? If you work with us, we can get 20 of your 35 million invested back into Duluth with an increase in your financial return, increase in your impact, and the same risk and liquidity within 3 to 5 years. And we can make sure the other 15 million isn't harming what you care about, human services in Duluth. But what we really want to do is work with you to identify the other 500 individuals and organizations that have more than $10 million who care about Duluth, and take them through this journey and activate their portfolio with those 50 tools to invest in Duluth, Minnesota. And then, Don, because we've kind of lost community banking and investing, we're going to have to use some of your grant dollars to actually recreate consumer, small business, startup product. What do you mean? Well, we're going to create an alternative payday lending program and lend money out at 8% for consumers. We're going to create a 0% student loan program. We're going to create a nonprofit grant advance facility. Why shouldn't I, who I have a grant coming in October, be able to assign it over to another entity and get access to that capital right now? We're going to invite Colorado Lending Source up because they'll go anywhere in the country. They have a Main Street character loan program that will give up to $50,000 to small businesses with good ideas, good character, bad or no credit. 3.42% default rate. They're giving a 3% return for their investors. If you do it out of your donor advised fund or private foundation, it's 103% return plus a tax deduction. Does anybody know how much venture capital goes to women right now in the United States? 2%. Does anybody know how much venture capital goes to people of color? 1%. An immigrant is the most likely person to start a business in the United States of America. Women start 1,200 businesses a day, men start 600. The very economic engine of our country is locked out of the capital markets. And so I say, Don, then we're going to have to create the investment product to collect this money. We're going to have to create the Duluth Community Note, the Duluth Guarantee Model, and then we're going to open it up for non-accredited investors. And we don't want my great Aunt Jan taking her last $500,000 of her IRA money and investing in Duluth without ensuring she's going to get the same, if not better, financial return. But now she'll know where her money's going. And so we can create that safety net product. And by working with us, over the next 5 to 10 years, we can take your $35 million and use it to catalyze $500 million of investment back into Duluth, Minnesota. And that's what we call Main Street 2.0. Taking the best of what used to work with relationship investing and banking, adding the best of Wall Street in terms of risk product, bringing it back down to Main Street. And by doing that, we can actually create the future we want. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to entertain a couple questions if I have time.
Stephanie, thank you so much. Hang on one second. I told you that this would blow your mind. Was I right? We had to do math after lunch. So there's that also. There are a couple questions. The exhibitor showcase opens now. We've got about 45 minutes. And then the next program will begin at 4:15. But if there's a question or two and you're willing to stay, I'd be happy to give you the mic. Okay. Stephanie, thank you again very much.
Thank you.